Okay, I'm gonna
We are rolling.
Otherwise my glasses fall.
Yes, yes.
Good. Well, yes. What we have in this box here is the spare iron source for this instance. And it's always good to have a spare so that it can be sitting in the box like that. And when there's an issue with your iron, you can simply swap it out rather than having to waste time cleaning or fixing the one that comes up. So they are put in boxes because you like to keep them clean. And so if I take this thing out of the box, there's these little handy dandy rods for that. There she is. So this is a complete iron source. This thing goes just in like that through this door. That's all there is. So the whole thing comes out. The electrical connections are made with the plugs on the side. And so, yeah, they go in there, and these are the high voltage cables. Let's see what we have here. If we look at it from this side, you see a little slit there. That's where the irons come out.
It's dirty.
Yeah, a little bit. Not super dirty. No. So these two plates here are to focus the beam onto the collector slit, which sits right underneath here. Why do you need to do that? Well, you have to focus the beam on that slit so that the focus can get carried through and so forth. But that's a totally different story. So,
And what are they called?
you can call them focusing plates for all I care, or half plates.
And as far as the software is concerned, what's the knob for those?
Well, this thing doesn't do any software with that. It has a knob.
Yes, but what would it be called in the software or on the knob?
Usually it's focusing, and then you have... There's two things about this. One is the difference in voltage between this plate and the actual source block, which is this thing. And the other thing is the difference in voltage between these two. So the difference in voltage between these two kind of does this. They often call them beam centering. It kind of moves the beam a little bit to get it right in the middle of the slit. The main voltage between them is kind of like a... How do you describe that? What's the focusing voltage? You make sure that the beam is at its narrowest when it goes right through the slit. Now, your samples, where do they come in? Well, we got a couple of holes in this thing. We got a fairly big hole there. And then we've got some smaller holes. Some of them have little plugs in them, like there's 3 on this side, and there's 2 on this side. So this thing sits like this. So this hole here meets up with the probe, which comes in here. And then we have some more inlets. The one that's coming out there is quite often a GC. It's something different in our case. The one on the bottom would have a reference inlet system that we've taken off. This one, that one on the top there, we just put a window there so we can see it. And so you're fairly flexible in both the number and the position of these inlets.
And where does our calibrant go?
We just put it into a gas line. Is the gas line on this thing? No.
So it enters the source
Oh yeah, well,
block.
what we do is we attach that little hose. This is a little pipe going into the source. We attach a little hose to that and make it come out here. And this is our reference inlet. For PFTBA, that's good enough. You don't have to heat it up. So, now, one of the things the other thing we should point out is you can pull this whole thing out, and what you have left now, so this is the ion volume, they call it. Let's stick this thing here. So those are the inlets. You can see a hole there. There'll be a filament mounted here, so that's where the electrons go in, and this is where they come out. So the electrons would travel through the source ionize the sample,
And the sample is perpendicular to that.
and then the ions would come out here. And there is the back of the source is a plate called a repeller, and this the entire
You
back.
can see
of the
that because that is the bit that
source.
often needs,
under that nut.
it often needs cleaning more than anything else.
Right. You can put a little bit of voltage on it to help push the ions out.
Yes, I think mine's leaking at the moment and needs cleaning.
Right. So this thing is easy to remove, and you can clean it.
Separate. You don't need to take the whole source carrier out.
No, you could leave this thing in there and just pull
Just
this
take
out
out, yeah.
if you want it.
And
So
clean the
let's-
iron region on its
Let's
own.
have a look what we got left here then. We
So-
have two identical looking things. Well, they're not actually identical. One of them is the filament, and that is the one on the bottom. Can we see there's a little wire there? Can we see that right there?
No.
It's a
Hold it still.
little shiny straight wire right
Yeah.
in there. That's the filament.
Yes, you can see if you know what you're looking for.
There you go. And then on the other side, we have no little wire. And they call that the trap. That's that the electrons hit after they get through the source.
Yes.
So,
And that's just
that-
basically a broken filament.
yeah, you basically have a broken filament. So that's the story of this kind of an ion source, which is, you can just put this back in and lock it in place. And that's it. The last feature are these two magnets here. And what they do is, because you've got the filament there and the trap there, they provide some field lines for the electrons to travel along, so that they tend to go straight rather than just smear out all over the place. And that's it. Now, it's interesting to see how different manufacturers solve the same thing. So this is Kratos Analytical.
But you have modified this to make it a lot easier
yes,
to handle as well.
Yes, there's a bunch of modifications to this. Because you could never do this, because half the wires would go to the other plug. So I decided that was stupid. So I just rewired the thing so that you can actually do this without too much problem. We have, I can pull out another source from another instrument. If we go here.
So we're moving through the lab now to a ZAP instrument. This too is a magnetic sector, as you can see.
Magnetic sector instrument. So the idea is pretty much the same. You have all your inlets, this one, that one, probe inlet, in a circle around this thing. What's in here is, this is the complete source. And again, you can just pull this whole thing out. The electrical contacts are made in here. You have these contact plates here. They're spring loaded, and what pushes on that is the actual pins and feed-throughs that are in here.
So this section is obviously all outside of the vacuum.
Yes. So there's the feed-throughs with the individual pins that make contact with that.
Okay, and can we change the voltages on those pins over here on the console?
Oh yeah, but we got the usual suspects in terms of controls on there.
And who makes this instrument?
This was VG Analytical.
I did my PhD on one of these.
It's
Reverse
it's
geometry.
a one-of-a-kind instruments, or this iron source is actually the same as for 7070. Now let's look at this thing. Yeah, well, it's very similar. Magnets. Oh, there's the little filament. And these are all the holes for the different inlets. Now this thing is, they call it a retractor. It's kind of an interesting VG invention. What happens with this, see, there's a little cup here, And this cup is intended to mate up with the end of this inlet. There's a quartz tube in there that ends in a little point. And if I turn this screw, and if all is well, you're going to see this thing come out. Da-da-da. Oh, there it goes. Yeah, see? And I'm going to move it back. Why do we need this? Sometimes it gets stuck in me like this should have been. Why do we need this? Well, if the source is in the instrument and this thing's out over the tip of that, one thing I can't do is pull it out because I'm going to break something. I'm going to break that tip. So if I want to take the source out, I have to back this thing off first, and then I can take it out. Other than on VG instruments, I've never seen anything like that. Kratos does it different. On the Kratos solution to this problem is to have the vacuum suck in the individual inlets until they hit the source. The drawback of that is that now your inlets need to be movable because they have to be able to move back and forth. So that makes everything kind of wobbly, and now you need bellows. And so how do you solve this? Well, it's not that easy. So similar idea. All the same elements are there. There's a repeller in there. Do I have an open source box? They're all put together. So there are other ways of doing it. We have lots of sources.
Lots of sources ready for when that one breaks.
Yeah, and they come from decommissioned instruments all over these companies. So these are two ion sources that I would consider easy to deal with because it's easy to remove them. And if I wanted to clean this thing, this is not that big a deal because I can just go like that, take that off, and then I can take this off, and then I can just keep going, and then at the end put it all back together. So it's not that bad. There are designs that are way worse. What comes to mind is J-hole, and as I just found out, the Mach 95 is a disaster as well. Yeah. I always put an iron source in a little tray like this so that the little screws and so forth don't get lost.
Yes, always need lots of spare ceramics.
If you're working on it, if I have a iron source here and I'm sitting down and I'm doing something with it, then that's something else. So let's say I'm sitting here with my little screwdriver and I go, and the little screw goes, pop, and then it gets to be hard to find. I've seen one installation where there's actually a drain in the floor right here. So if something bounces off the bench, it goes down the drain. And that's
you only do that a few times before you learn to create a clean
you learn
space.
how to cover the drain first. And,
Yes.
And then, later on you learn how to put it in a little cardboard tray.
And I have
Make
lots
it
of
cardboard,
little...
nothing hard because
They bounce.
you don't want it to bounce, you just want it to go full.
Yes.
Stay there. Okay.
Okay.
Iron sources done.